Hello all, and welcome back to my deep dive series. Today's video is going to focus on Her Story, a game where all players review interrogation footage of a woman, or two women? You see, the woman on film claims to be two separate people. She was brought in because her husband is missing, and the police are questioning her. It's up to the player to watch these interview videos and piece together a story. The game is meant to be played out of order, although the videos can be watched in order if the players know the way. Anyway, this isn't a game review, so enough about the gameplay mechanics. Now, I've been intentionally vague up to this point. As always, today's deep dives will go heavy into spoilers. That said, here's your spoiler warning. If you want to see the game, then check out my live streams. Link is in the description. Or, try the game out yourself. It's only $10 on Steam. All that said, let's dive deeper. Her story revolves around watching videos of Hannah and/or Eve and her/their retelling of events that happened to Hannah's late husband, Simon. The cops seem to suspect Hannah, but she has an alibi. Does it hold up? Well, no. At least not in my opinion. The game itself takes place over the course of 7 different days, and each day contains numerous video clips of Hannah and/or Eve recounting her life story and what happened the night of the murder. Now, I have used some confusing language up to this point. I mentioned that the interview footage is of one woman, but the story revolves around 2 twins, Hannah and Eve. They have lived a strange life according to Eve. While the game presents the fact that Eve and Hannah are twins, my hypothesis is that Eve and Hannah are the exact same person. Now, I'm not talking about dissociative identity disorder. I just mean the fact that Hannah made up the entire story of Eve and actually killed her husband. So, in this deep dive, I want to break down the following: Hannah's elaborate story and where I feel it falls apart, Hannah's first murder, and Hannah's motivation for killing Simon. That said, let's start with recapping the story as it's told through the videos, and then I'll pick out where I think the story falls apart and add what I think actually happened. The first interrogation takes place on June 18th, 1994 between 7:17 and 7:26. This is Hannah's first interview with the police, and you can see she's nervous. This interrogation revolves around the cops asking her about her late husband, Simon. He made intricate mirrors, was 6 foot tall, and very dreamy. Hannah tells the police that the two had an argument the last time she saw him. Simon left after the argument, never to return. Hannah believes that Simon had a few drinks at a local pub called The Rock, and he might have spoken to Helen. He apparently liked Helen, as he liked blondes. These are Hannah's words. The argument is described as quote-unquote married couple stuff, and nothing specific, as was stated in the interrogation video.
It's married couple stuff. A stupid argument, nothing specific. No one knows how to push your buttons, let it be those you're close to.
She mentions other arguments, but he never left after those. The police offer to come around and help her look, and she asks that they let her know when they're coming. Hannah really pushes that Simon is not the type to hurt himself, and instead, someone must have done something to him. Or there was an accident. She then does what anyone that lost their loved one would do. She asks the police to find Simon, and then gets up and leaves without showing any emotion. Okay, so let's break down the first day. Hannah reveals a lot in this day actually, which shows her motivation or desire to hurt Simon. She displays a bit of jealousy when admitting that Simon likes blondes. She looks legit hurt after admitting that to the police. Players will find out in the upcoming interrogations that Simon's dead body was located in Hannah's house. Hannah admits later that she was waiting for the right time to quote-unquote stumble over Simon's body. So when the police offer to help, this throws off her plan. She wants to know when they're coming so she can prep the house. Finally, Hannah really pushes that Simon is not the type to hurt himself, and instead, someone must have done something to him. This, in my mind, comes off as a confession. Before I touch on the next day, I want to draw attention to 2 additional details from day 1. The first video clip shows Hannah with her hair down and asking for a cup of coffee. Keep that in the back of your mind for now. Anyway, the second interrogation takes place on June 25th, 1994, a mere 7 days after the first interrogation. This day starts with Hannah with her hair up and asking for tea. She has a visible bruise on her face caused by walking into a cupboard. Again, her words. The police ask Hannah several questions about Simon. She says she will answer if she remembers, and then proceeds to go into detail with each question. Simon left after the argument at about 8 o'clock. The night that they had an argument was Hannah's birthday. They ate a meal together, and she got mad over the present he gave her. Or let me correct myself.
It wasn't the present so much. It was one of those arguments that had been simmering for a while. The present was a mirror. A nice mirror. He'd engraved the glass, the kind of mirror a princess would have in a story. He made it specially for me.
It's revealed that Hannah and Simon got married when Hannah was 17, after Simon got her pregnant. The two got married, Simon dropped out of college, and then Hannah lost the baby, and then her parents. Apparently the parents died due to food poisoning. Hannah inherited their house and moved in. She ended up getting a job at a school as a cook, and talks about there always being pressure between her and Simon. The police take Hannah's fingerprints, and she mentions that she burned her hand in an oven. Okay, let's break down the second day. Hannah mentions that she has always had a tenuous relationship with Simon, almost like he didn't like her at all. She lost her parents, for which the reason is not fully revealed yet. Let's move on to the next day, where even more is revealed. The third interrogation takes place on June 27th, 1994, 2 days after the last one. Hannah's hair is down again, and she's asking for a black coffee. The day starts off strange. Not the coffee part, but the fact that she starts talking about blood. This is then followed up by the police asking her about the bruise. It's gone now, and she reaches up to touch the wrong side of her face. Anyway, back to the whole blood thing. Apparently, Simon has been found, but he's no longer alive. Hannah magically found his body when searching the basement for old stuff that she happened to be, quote-unquote, randomly thinking about. The murder was grisly. His throat was slashed. She never thought to look in the cellar because it was only a place to put things that she doesn't need. Hannah tells the police that she wasn't in the house, presumably why she didn't stumble upon the body sooner. It's good to note, though, that she avoids eye contact while stating that. Hannah wasn't in the house the entire night after their argument. She left shortly after Simon. She was upset, so she left. She drove north until she couldn't anymore. She ended up at Glasgow and stayed there for the night. Hannah returned the next day, and she threw up. The reason she threw up is because she's pregnant, and the morning sickness kicked in. Simon didn't think Hannah could get pregnant, and she states that she wasn't even sure if she was going to keep the baby. Hannah then returns to telling her alibi. She left Glasgow late Saturday morning, and she slept in the car the night before. She was back at the house by 3 p.m. This interrogation goes in another direction after she tries to get herself eliminated as a suspect. The police ask Hannah to make up a story based on a series of pictures. She agrees, but states that she isn't good at making up stories, and then proceeds to make up elaborate stories for a series of photos. In the first story, Hannah equates a girl to Rapunzel. She talks about the girl being trapped and looking for someone to let her out. Rapunzel was apparently Hannah's favorite book growing up. She said that they read those types of books all the time as children. The stories then change per photo to a woman preparing a meal for her ill husband. Her husband was cheating on her, for her only to find out that it was actually his brother. And then the girl is running away, scared because she did something bad. But maybe it was mistaken identity and someone else committed the crime. She tries to exonerate herself again, then explain the timeline of events that day. She woke up, Simon cooked her breakfast, he decided to give her his gift, they had cake, happy birthday at her school, meal, birthday present, and then they talked about the baby. Simon left, she was mad, so she left. The police and Hannah discuss Hannah's time at Glasgow, and she believes this should eliminate her as a suspect. The interrogation continues with talk about Simon and if anyone had anything against him, and she ends it with saying that she's now living with a friend. So, now we know that Simon was murdered, and Hannah is a bit of a liar. She tells the police that she isn't creative, and then goes on to create an intricate story regarding the Rorschach-like test that the police gave her. Does this mean that the story about Glasgow is made up as well? And what about the quote-unquote friend she mentioned at the end? Let's move on to the fourth interrogation and find out. The fourth interrogation takes place on June 30th, 1994, 3 days after the third interview. She's sporting her hair tied into a ponytail and asks for tea on this day. The police ask her how she's been, to which she says,
"Well, fine, considering."
She's more weirded out by the police going through her things. They ask her about fingerprints, to which she seems confused about. There were fingerprints found in Hannah and Simon's bedroom, along with blonde hairs. Hairs that came from a blonde wig. There's also talk about what happened when Hannah returned from Glasgow. This led to the initial conversation with the police. Her gift is also missing now. That is, the handcrafted mirror that Simon gave her. The police then switch the conversation to the possibility of Simon having an affair, to which Hannah loses her cool and starts getting angry. She told the police that she has never been unfaithful, and the police insinuate that she had relations with a lot of men. The police ask her about whether or not she has ever hurt someone, to which she replies, yes.
Hurt someone? Yes. But everyone thinks that from time to time, right? You just want to lash out.
Hannah then brings up a friend named Eve, a friend that she's had since she was a kid. She was always jealous of Eve. She even almost killed her. They would often do bad things, like the fact that they broke into Bob Dylan's tour bus and had the police called on them. Hannah's mom actually had to pick Hannah up from the police station after that. But here's where things go off the rails. Hannah asks for another tea to get the cop out of the room. When he's away, Hannah begins freaking out over the fact that she brought up Eve. She begins tapping out a code with her fingers. One hand taps something, then the other. The interrogator returns, and Hannah asks if the camera was recording the whole time. The conversation then goes to when her parents were found dead in their room. She states that they died via food poisoning, poisonous mushrooms called death caps. Everyone thought that her parents had the flu. Then Hannah goes into how she's infertile, even though she's pregnant. The day ends with the police asking her about the guitar that they found in her house. Okay, quick recap on the fourth interrogation. We find out that Hannah does in fact have violent tendencies, as she admits to almost murdering her friend at one point. She also gets really mad when anyone mentions that Simon may have had an affair. We also find out about the friend Hannah mentioned in the last video, Eve. Eve is going to become a more prominent figure in the next few interrogation videos, so more on that in a little bit. We also find out the reason Hannah's parents died is because of poisonous mushrooms. We'll find out later that Hannah's dad was an expert in identifying mushrooms, so this death is a little suspicious. More on that in a bit as well. The big thing to note in this video is her performance when the interrogator left the room. She taps out a code with her fingers using tap code, also called Smitty code. It's a code that uses a Polybius square, also shown here. The taps are as follows.
What are you doing talking about Eve?
Now, my hearing may be going, but with what I heard, it spells Liveu or live you. But I think it's supposed to be Loveu or love you. Anyway, let's move on to the next interrogation. The fifth interrogation takes place on July 1st, 1994, one day after the last interrogation. She has her hair down and asks for a black coffee. The interrogator asks about the night she came home, and Hannah repeats her alibi, word for word, and it comes off incredibly rehearsed. The interrogator asks another question, and Hannah spills coffee on herself. After frantically trying to get the coffee out of her shirt, she decides to just remove it. No worries though, she doesn't show much skin, just her bare arms revealing some sick ink. It's an apple and a snake representing Adam and Eve. She got the tattoo to express her individuality. So badass. Anyway, the tattoo is apparently something she got years back. Then she reminds everyone that she's pregnant and she shouldn't even drink coffee. Hannah is less timid and more outgoing this time around. She shoots the shit with the interrogator before finally talking about her relationship with Simon again. She's more open about her sex life now, as she recounts her time with her first lover and several others, then Simon. The interrogator brings up adultery again, and Hannah shrugs it off saying,
Have I ever cheated on Simon? You asked that question yesterday.
The conversation continues, and Hannah feigns being upset before accusing the cop of cheating on his wife. The interrogator mentions that he thinks she killed Simon because of an affair. She said she didn't because she was in Glasgow. She also deflects away from being asked about the wig and suggests that someone could have gotten in through the cat flap on the door. The interrogator apparently leaves the room at one point, and Hannah just stares at the camera with a weird look on her face. She asks again if the camera was recording when the interrogator returns. The interrogator actually went out to get some information on a speeding ticket that she received a few months back in Oxford. She states that she had to get something and tends to drive fast.
You must be desperate for leads if you're getting hung up over 6-month-old speeding tickets.
The interrogator brings up that Simon was in Oxford at the time and insinuates that he was having an affair there. She originally states that he was there for a conference, but then later admits that they were both there and he took her there and planned to charge it as a business expense. She used a fake name, ordered room service, and didn't leave the room. She then sings a song about two siblings fighting. And I'm not kidding about that part.
So she pushed her in and held her down. Oh, the wind and the rain watched her as she slowly drowned. Oh, the dreadful wind and rain.
So Hannah has changed a lot in one day, hasn't she? In fact, now you should be coming to the realization that Hannah may have a twin or a split personality. The personality of the person in the recording changes drastically between the two people/personalities. One twinner personality is timid and the other isn't. One likes coffee, the other tea. One likes to wear her hair down and the other doesn't. So a side-by-side shot between interrogations 4 and 5 shows that Hannah did not have a tattoo in interrogation 4. But I think the tattoo is fake. I think it's a rub-on tattoo, and the reason that I say that is because of the theatrics that she used in order to reveal it to the interrogator. Anyway, let's move on to day 6. The 6th interrogation takes place on July 2nd, 1994, one day after the last interrogation. Hannah has her hair down and is drinking black coffee. The police are apparently not buying her alibi anymore. It sounded too rehearsed. The police indicate that she may have a twin. Hannah gets mad and storms out, which I guess you can just do back in the 90s. I mean, I guess you can, assuming she wasn't under arrest and didn't give up her rights. Anywho, this day is short, but it shows her temper again. Let's move on to the last interrogation, where everything is about to be revealed. Alright, this one is the longest interrogation, so bear with me on this. The final interrogation takes place on July 3rd, 1994, one day after the last interrogation. Hannah's in a new room, refuses a lawyer, and agrees to a lie detector test. She passes every question except for what her name is. She said her name was Hannah, but in actuality, her name is Eve. What we then get is this long, elaborate story about how Eve was Hannah's twin, but the midwife that delivered her took her from her mother because her mother wasn't expecting twins. Then Eve grew up like a street over and thought Hannah was a reflection. The midwife that took Eve, her name is Florence by the way, died when Eve was 8. And then Eve met Hannah and then hid in Hannah's attic for her entire childhood life. They would swap places, and the story honestly just becomes too unbelievable. Eve says they shared everything, food, injuries, men, until Simon. Hannah didn't want to share Simon. Hannah even eventually kicked Eve out of the house when Eve was pretending to be Hannah in front of Simon. Eve eventually does run into Simon at a local bar while she's performing her hit song about killing her siblings.
And made paper pegs of her finger bones, all the wind and the rain. Yes, he made paper pegs from her finger bones, all the dreadful wind and rain.
Okay, I don't actually know what she was singing, but still. Simon was impressed with how much Eve looked like Hannah, except that Eve wore a blonde wig. After meeting several times, Simon kissed her, and then eventually brought Eve back to Simon and Hannah's house. He wanted to get caught to prove that they were different people. Eve got pregnant by Simon. Eve had to lie to Hannah about whose kid it was. Hannah also wanted to come clean about Eve to Simon. She eventually does, and that's what caused the confusion on Hannah's birthday. It's also revealed that Eve was the one that drove to Glasgow. In between Eve's departure and return, Hannah had donned Eve's blonde wig and killed Simon. Simon decided he wanted to be with Eve, and gave Hannah the mirror, thinking Hannah was Eve. Eve helped cover up the murder, helped with the alibi, and they decided they would quote-unquote find the body at a specific time. Hannah dies, I think. Then Eve asks if the police can arrest someone that doesn't exist. And then she asks for a lawyer after saying,
"You have no murder weapon. You have nothing. And all these stories we've been telling each other, just that. Stories."
So, yeah, Hannah, or Eve, comes clean. She admits that Hannah did kill Simon, but the person being interviewed isn't Hannah, it's Hannah's twin sister. So how true do you think any of that was? Well, I think it was all BS. Lie detector tests are known for not being reliable, so it doesn't surprise me that she can fake it out. She probably gave them a false reading so she could go into that elaborate story. There's even another tap code in this video. This one is... which translates to BYDHANNAN, which I assume is supposed to be bye Hannah. She did it quick, so I expect mistakes. You could tell she was thinking hard about it while she was doing the tapping. So, I think one thing is true about all this, and that's that Hannah did in fact kill Simon. It's my contention that Eve doesn't exist at all, and this is an elaborate story that was concocted to try to get Hannah found innocent. If Hannah can convince the police that she had a secret twin sister that has no records of her existing, which is in some of the details that I glossed over from the final interrogation, then she can just say that she's the twin and let the police search for a person that doesn't exist.
Can you arrest someone who doesn't exist?
Hannah is shown to be very creative, as is evident by her stories from the third interrogation. She knew where Simon was, that is, dead in her basement, and she concocted this elaborate plan from the get-go while she waited to confront the cops. That is, driving to Glasgow to get the traffic ticket and coming up with the story of Eve. It was all an elaborate plan to make herself seem innocent and or like a different person. Now, I hear you asking, hey, look, the game presents itself pretty well, and it makes sense that it was always two people. I mean, what about the bruise? Well, strange voice that I just made up, you're right. The bruise on Hannah's face was gone within 2 days, and she touched the opposite side of her face. The mirror opposite, if you will. Mirror images play a key role in Hannah's made-up story. Again, I believe that this entire story is concocted, so my thought is that Hannah may have bruised her face, or used makeup to achieve that effect. Then either covered up the bruise with makeup, or she removed the makeup if the bruise was faked. Then all she had to do was put her hand on the wrong side of her face when asked about the bruise, and BAM! She has created the illusion that she's someone else. And the same can be said about the tattoo. Again, I believe it was just a rub-on tattoo. The way Hannah revealed the tattoo was definitely planned out ahead of time. She purposefully spills the coffee so she can take off her shirt to reveal said tattoo. The tricks actually begin in the very first video of each day. If the actress has her hair down, she's pretending to be Eve. If it's up, then she's Hannah. Same with the coffee and tea. If it's coffee, it's Eve. If it's tea, it's Hannah. But what about the fact that even Hannah got detained for breaking into Bob Dylan's tour bus? Well, that's an interesting question. Since there's no dialogue from the police, we can assume they never looked into that event. Given Hannah, and I guess Eve, were young, the police may not have kept a record of it happening. But think about this strange voice. Eve was supposed to be hidden from Hannah's parents. So, how does this story make sense at all? Hannah's mom would be pretty shocked to go into a police station and find someone that looked identical to her daughter, wouldn't she? I doubt the two would chance getting caught like that, so this story has to be completely fabricated. One thing that Hannah didn't account for in all of her storytelling was the fact that she left fingerprints at the scene of the crime. She gave the cops her fingerprints during the second interrogation, but then gets confused when the cops bring up fingerprints. Apparently there were multiple sets throughout the house, more than likely probably hers, but she does mention burning her hand in the oven during the second interrogation, so it probably took the police longer to run them than if she hadn't burnt her hand. It's also possible that she tried to burn her prints off so she wouldn't be caught. It's hard to tell though, since the police don't have any lines of dialogue in the game. But when Hannah eventually asks for a lawyer at the end, that means that the police have something on her. Although, to be fair, she just admitted to covering up a murder, so either or. Hannah also puts on performances when she needs to. For instance, when she mentions Eve for the first time, she asks the interrogator for another drink. Then she begins to freak out and does tap code in front of the camera, conveniently forgetting that it was on. It's very performative. Speaking of, the Glasgow alibi was also very rehearsed. It came off almost natural the first time, then it came off as rehearsed the next few times. Granted, the only reason she went there was to get a ticket to prove that she was out that night. But still, she said it almost verbatim each time, and it just sounded faked. But what about the fact that she failed the lie detector test question about her name? Even if I believe you that it was all one woman, was she really Eve? Well, maybe, but it almost doesn't matter at that point, because it still proves my point. But remember, like I said, lie detector tests aren't always reliable. Yes, someone that is administering the test and has been doing it for a long time can discern when people are lying, even if they try to use tactics to cheat the test. But it is still possible to cheat the test, so I believe that she failed that question on purpose. She was committed to the lie, all the way to the end of the game, where she states that everything she told the police was all a fabrication, a story. None of it was true. Everything at the end was an elaborate story that she came up with. Then she asked for a lawyer because she knew that she had been caught. So yeah, Hannah even admits to the police that she made everything up. There was never any Eve. Let me take a quick detour and address my next topic, Hannah's first kill. So Hannah is a compulsive liar, that much is evident. It's hard to believe anything she said, but you can tell that she has some anger issues that she's dealing with. Chances are she had a troubled youth. Maybe her parents kept her inside, like in her Eve story, and that's where she dreamt of a heroic prince saving her, like Rapunzel or a fairy tale princess. She must have had some resentment for her parents, and I think she killed them too. Hannah admits that her father was an expert at identifying mushrooms, but the cause of death was ingestion of poisonous mushrooms. That makes no sense. So my thought is that Hannah, filled with murderous intent over the fact that her parents kept her inside when she was younger, poisoned her parents with the death cap mushroom. Now, she was able to garner attention from Simon, who was probably upset over the loss of the baby, and gain a house in the process. Hannah has mentioned violent tendencies as a child, and I do believe this part of the story. She seems like she wants help in the grand scheme of things, and also wants to get it off her chest. So that's what I think actually happened to her parents. But what about the motivation for killing Simon? Throughout the videos in the game, you can see Hannah get very emotional at the mere thought of Simon cheating on her. She clearly gets triggered over the idea of Simon being unfaithful. Hannah mentions that Simon liked blondes, which you can see that Hannah is, in fact, not blonde. She even mentioned that Simon liked a woman named Helen. There's the whole Oxford trip as well. The police believe that Simon was there cheating on Hannah, but Hannah offers up a story that she was there with him using a fake name. That's another made-up story. Simon had to be there with another woman, and Hannah was trying to keep her composure during the interrogation. I also believe that there is some truth to Simon meeting Eve at the bar. Not that Eve exists, but the fact that Hannah was there in a blonde wig. That said, I'm going to use the name Eve to describe Hannah in the blonde wig to help me differentiate in this next part. Hannah had mentioned that Simon acted differently around Eve, and I do believe that Simon did act different with Eve because he was probably trying to charm the lady he was interested in into getting into her pants. Simon probably knew it was actually Hannah and played along, getting her pregnant in the process. I have a feeling that the truth is that Simon revealed that he knew what Hannah was up to. The two argued, and Hannah killed him out of embarrassment and or anger because he technically quote-unquote cheated on her since she was using an alias. And that's what I think really happened. The cool thing is, her story is completely open-ended, and I'm sure you can argue the existence of Eve as well, even though Hannah says everything was made up. Regardless, keep in mind that this is just my opinion on the game and the story, and is in no way to be taken as truth. That said, I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into this interesting story. Thank you for watching, and AMF, adios my friends.